Hello, this is Dave Redder. This is a video about how to use Ajax, and we're going to use it through jQuery to gain access to data on a server, and we'll be doing that of course, from the browser, and do it without actually having to make a round trip of a whole page. So, in particular, the goal is to be able to write a collection of functions over in a single file on the server, so that we can make a request on the client at the browser in JavaScript or jQuery to request services from a single one of those functions. So here's the idea. This file that you see right here, when I run it, looks like this. And I've got a server name and username and password, and when I click on Show Databases, it goes over there and finds out what databases this user has access to on the server that's named up in the server box up here. And as a result, we want to be able to display that information, and we want to be able to get it quickly and not have to make round trips. So the crux of this whole thing is buried away in this load databases list method, and it's up here in this Ajax file, Ajax sample, which I'll show you. Load databases list calls do Ajax calls the Ajax, and the Ajax is the thing that actually sends the information to the site over on the other side, over to the server, gets that information, and then returns it to the appropriate place. So let's take a quick look at this. Load databases is simply the method that gets called when this button gets clicked. This button right here I can get rid of. Let me just get rid of that. It doesn't need to be there because we're not using it. And then when we do that load button, we come here, it calls do Ajax. Do Ajax declares these three variables that are there to receive the server name, username, password, and we do that through this call right here. This is jQuery right here that says, give me the thing whose ID is server. That's the pound means ID, just as it does with CSS. And that thing I know has a function called .val that I can use to grab the value out of that thing, because I know it's an input box. And if it doesn't have one, it'll complain to you about that. But in any case, I know that this guy right here is an input box because I created it, and there it is right there. And so it's got a val that's associated with it. I've got stringify here then, which comes from the JSON library. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And JavaScript object notation is simply a notation for storing and transmitting information that's relatively complex, a little bit like XML is even, but it's JSON, which has kind of become more popular in a lot of circles. And in any case, this stringify method in JSON, the JSON library, takes whatever you give it and converts it into a JSON formatted value. And so we're going to put that in the server. Username, password, same things. Here we're going to call the Ajax method up here with this argument. This argument is in fact the name of the function that we want to call in the server file. These are the credentials for a user to log in, and we make this call to the Ajax up here. And this thing takes this information and it makes a call to this get databases function, which is right here, or class, or I'm sorry, a server file. And the kind of call it makes is called a post, because what we're doing here is we're taking values that we have here, sending them to this file. It somehow figures out how to deal with those, and I'll show you how that's done. And it also knows then, because of this business right here, the method business, that this is the function that we want to call. So this is what's going on here. These two file or lines say that when Ajax is done, call process data. And if Ajax fails, just raise an alert. But we'll look at process data when we get back from the server. But for right now, do Ajax, creates the Ajax object, sets its done and fail methods. And the Ajax takes these values. This method, server, username, and password are the values that that you see. Here's the server, username, and password. Method is something that that the $Ajax knows. This is the method that we want to use, and it's the method that we sent in as an argument. So these are essentially the arguments that we will send over to the browser. So let's take a look at this file now, getdatabases.php. Not a lot going on here, but if we look at this piece right here, we'll see that we're going to use this super global called $_post to get the server value, also to get the username value, also to get the password value. And notice here that we're also sanitizing these values so that we don't have perhaps dangerous input that a user might have provided, a bad guy user might have provided to try to break our security. In any case, whatever we end up with here is still going to be JSON encoded, and so we want to decode it and put that in this variable. And this is now in PHP that we're talking. You can see up here. This is all in PHP. So by the time we get here, we've got server name, username, password, and those happen to be the three things you need for MySQL iConnect to create a connection object, which is this guy right here. So our ultimate goal is to create an array of database names, which you see there. This is the query that we're going to execute, show databases. This is the result we get from using this connection and calling its query method with this show databases string as its argument. And this is how you go about going through a query result, a MySQL style result, when it contains multiple rows. You do this, and you should go look up fetch array and know that $row of 0 is the place where the name is stored. This array push simply says to push in onto this array, database names that we created up here, onto this array, that database name. So when we get done with this, when we get down to here, we've got database names loaded with an array of the database names that the user with these credentials has access to. So now what we're going to do is create a return object. And we're going to create it to be in the standard class, which is a little bit like the object class in C# or C++ Java. And $return success, simply we're creating a field within the return object. So we're creating a structure here essentially, and we're saying that success was true. In the real deal, we would spend a little bit more effort trying to make sure that we did succeed and that we're really telling the truth here. But for this example, I think this is enough. If we had an error, we would throw error message in here, but since we don't, we'll leave that alone. $return data, and I'm going to create this array, data of database names. So data is an associative array, and this piece has the list of names in it. The one with this association string has the list of names in it that we retrieved into database names. And how do I know? Because that's what I'm putting in there, right there. And then all I have to do is just say JSON encode $return. So I want to send some JSON back. I'm going to get that into a JSON variable, $JSON variable. You call it whatever you want. And then I'm going to echo $JSON. So the question becomes then, how did I get to this method? How did it know to call this method when I did this? Well, it said something about it here, but that's just one of the post values that comes in right here, the method. And if you look in here and you look up here, you'll see that this says $_post. There's that super global. And it says, go look in your method element. We can use strings as indexes on this thing. And so that would be the method name. And this thing right here says use that name as the name of a function and execute it. So this is just like saying get databases left, right, paren. And when we do that, it gets back this JSON string, which when this thing gets executed, it gets echoed back to whoever called. Well, who called? Who called was this Ajax method. Now, this is a little bit different because we've got what's called this callback function here. And so when we get a return from this via this echo, that means that the thing that we're getting back is going to be sent to process data, this guy, in its argument. So that's where that JSON string comes back in. Let's go see what we do with it. All we do is grab this response into some convenient variable to hold it in. And then we do this jQuery loop that says for every response, every item in response.data of database names, in other words, that's the array of database names, I want you to call this function. Now it likes to have two values in here, a key and a value. And that function is, we're only going to use the value part, ends up giving us the key and value for each one of those names. Well, here we go with this pound databases. If we go back and look now at this is in jQuery again. Pound databases is this select. And this is the way you go about, this is the way you go about putting something in there. We're going to put a dollar option, a jQuery option object in there, and its value is going to be value.toString, and its text value is also going to be value.toString. We're using the same value. So the idea is that when you click on something like this, you have information schema and DB demo here. When I click on DB demo, I want to know that I clicked on DB demo. But in fact, I'm going to use that thing as the value that I want to find out where the tables. I'm not doing that in this video. I'm going to suggest you do it. But you can use that value, which would be the value that provides you that information. So you'll see how to do that later, but it's very similar, except this value right here becomes an argument to get tables. It's very similar to what we've done to get these databases. So hopefully that will help you understand what happened to make this a database retrieving method or function to go over to the server and get this information. If you think about it now, when we've got if we wanted to, let me kind of break some of this down. If we wanted to have another method that got called, we could simply just put that method here, just like we've got this one, function my new method, and whatever it's supposed to do over on the server. And over here, in order to call it via Ajax, we would do the same kinds of things. We do the same thing here with perhaps different arguments on this data, but we would have the name of the new method in another method like this, another Ajax, because when it gets here, it just looks at that right there and it knows that that's the method to call. So my suggestion to you is that you would take this video, study it a little bit, perhaps go look at this page that you see here. It's HTML5 and beyond, jQuery, Ajax with JSON and PHP, which is what I really retrieved most of this information from. This had too much going on to be a real good introduction, but I think I've kind of boiled out most of that stuff and filtered it out, and you've got just exactly what you need here to do this. But I think that it would be a good idea for you to be able to, when you click on this, have another box over here, maybe not a drop-down box or maybe a list box or something, that when you picked a database here, it would show you all of the tables in the database. And that would be another step of similar kind of things. You'd maybe have a method here called get tables. So anyway, I think that would be a good thing to do, and the reason this is called Workbench Lite, as you see right here, because it is kind of the beginnings of what MySQL Server's workbench method or application looks like. You could write it for the web. You could have one for yourself that was just like you want it to be. So with that in mind, I hope that you will be able to move on and create that addition to it and get a feel for how to make these Ajax calls. Take care.